Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight,
Democrats had a strong night.
The red wave Republicans predicted didn't quite materialize. Our Spotlight Politics team has takeaways from the midterms.
Illinois Democrats who ran for seats in Congress had a pretty good election night. We hear from some of those winners.
Wow, what a night.
What's next for Governor J.B. Pritzker after his resounding re-election?
Plus, voters also re-elect incumbents in other statewide offices. We chat with Illinois' comptroller, treasurer, and attorney general.
And Democrats claim victory in 2 state Supreme Court races. Results from that and the Workers' Right Amendment ballot question.
And Cook County Board President Toni Preckwinkle declares victory for the 4th time. She joins us for a one-on-one.
First, some of today's top stories. President Joe Biden calls last night's midterm results, quote, a good night for democracy. Democrats at this point appear to have defied expectations of a red wave. In a lengthy news conference today, Biden celebrated the better-than-expected performance of Democrats, but also made it clear he says he wants to work with the other side of the aisle.
Our democracy has been tested in recent years, but with their votes, the American people have spoken and proven once again that democracy is who we are. While the press and the pundits are predicting a giant red wave, it didn't happen. Regardless of what the final tally in these elections show, and there's still some counting going on, I'm prepared to work with my Republican colleagues.
And coming up at the program, we'll have much more analysis of the midterm elections with our Spotlight Politics team.
Illinois House Republican leader Jim Durkin is done with leadership. Durkin announces his decision not to seek re-election as House Minority Leader after a disappointing election night for Illinois Republicans. In a statement, Durkin referenced the poor GOP results, which saw Democrats retain supermajorities in the Illinois House and Senate, and Governor J.B. Pritzker easily fending off his Republican challenger, Darren Bailey. Durkin says it has been, quote, the honor of a lifetime to lead the House Republican caucus. He adds, quote, while I am not pleased with the results, I will accept them. I began this journey as a voice of moderation and conclude this journey the same way I started, a voice of moderation.
Chicago police say an off-duty officer was involved in a shooting in Belmont-Cragen this morning. It's unclear at this point if anyone was shot. In a statement, the police department says the shooting occurred at 816 on North Laramie Avenue. The statement goes on to say, quote, the off-duty officer was transported to an area hospital for observation and then released. At this time, it's unknown if there were any individuals injured in this shooting incident. The Civilian Office of Police Accountability is investigating, and the police department says the officer involved will be placed on routine administrative duties for 30 days.
Coming up in the program, some of last night's election winners on their victories and what's next.
But first, he's won another 4 years in office as Illinois governor, but what will J.B. Pritzker do the entire term? We dive into that and more right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabee family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker wins another 4-year term, and it was a decisive victory among other Democratic wins last night. But what's he going to do with this next term, and will he finish it out? Amanda Vinicky joins us now with a look ahead. Amanda, a lot of pressing questions here.
Yeah, Paris. Now, as you hinted, Pritzker didn't just win. He ran by a decent margin there with nearly, but not all precincts reporting totals. He is ahead by more than 10 points over Republican nominee Darren Bailey. Not just Pritzker, Democrats dominated, winning every statewide race. Because of last night, Illinois' congressional delegation is set to have more Democrats. The party's poised to increase its control of the state Supreme Court. And though some races are too close to call, it's certain Democrats will hold on to their supermajorities in the state legislature and likely even add to their ranks. Now, Pritzker, not only the party figurehead, he's also a billionaire who the past 2 years has spent at least $150 million on his and other Democrats' campaigns.
Illinois is worth it. As you know, that we had 2 MAGA billionaires who were coming against us, attacking everything that we stand for. They spent over $100 million, and we're not just going to sit and get pummeled by them. We're going to defend ourselves and tell people what we stand for.
Amanda, the $150 million question, what does he plan to do in his second term?
Yeah, Paris, it is a good question, and Pritzker says that it may be boring, but he wants to continue to focus on the state's finances. He also on the campaign trail talked about making college free for any student whose family is at or below the median income. Now, look for movement on both of those down the road. There's a more immediate agenda that comes first, and high on that list, that major criminal justice law that was a centerpiece of GOP attacks this election season. Voters did not end up punishing Democrats for it, but about half of the Illinois state's attorneys are still suing to stop it from taking effect, and Pritzker himself has said it needs fixes. In a Victory Lap news conference this morning, Pritzker didn't get into specifics.
There's a lot of work that's been done by the General Assembly over the last number of months in working groups, and so they're going to bring that to the veto session, and I'll be watching carefully. I've made my thoughts clear, and we'll see if we can get something done during the veto session to address the changes that we ought to be making.
And that veto session that he mentioned is set to begin on Tuesday.
Amanda, Governor Pritzker really leaned in on the issue of abortion during his campaign. What's coming up in this term in terms of abortion legislation?
Well, yeah, Paris, you may recall that the day the U.S. Supreme Court came out with the Dobbs decision, the governor said that he would call a special session to pass measures like giving out-of-state residents protections if they receive abortions in Illinois. That never happened. The governor says it will be addressed. But given the national dynamic and uncertainty over abortion laws, he was asked if Illinois should consider a constitutional amendment guaranteeing the right to an abortion.
It's certainly something that we could think about. It is obviously very difficult to get things onto the Illinois Constitution. And so that's one of the considerations, I think. But here's the thing. We are a pro-choice state, and certainly as governor for the next 4 years and with a Democratic General Assembly, I think we will successfully expand our capacity to deal with the challenges that are now facing Illinois because every state around us has become an anti-choice state.
The governor also says he wants Illinois to pass a statewide ban on assault-grade guns, but he couldn't give a timeline for when the legislature might take that up. Now, the big question overriding all of this, how long will Pritzker be around to pursue this agenda? There is chatter he'll make a play for the White House if President Biden does not run for re-election. The governor was asked about this repeatedly.
I commit to you that I'm, planning to be the governor for the next 4 years. We have too many things that we need to accomplish. I don't know what. That's absolutely untrue. I have not talked to any staff outside of my own staff, and so no, like I said, there's no plan to do anything other than be governor for the next 4 years.
Now, regardless of his political ambitions, it is clear that Pritzker's feeling confident, even if his opponent obviously believes Pritzker has no reason to be. Bailey did give the governor a congratulatory call last night, but Bailey ended his concession speech with a verbal slap.
Illinois must be better. Our leaders must be better. And J.B. Pritzker, you need to be better.
Now, Bailey won't be returning to the legislature, but he says he's not getting out of Illinois politics, and he called on Republicans to step up as loyal opposition to Democrats. Pritzker, for his part, called Bailey a disciple of President Donald Trump and implored the GOP to change.
I really believe that the Republican Party, and that especially includes the Illinois Republican Party, who nominated Darren Bailey, that they stand for the MAGA Republican ideas, Donald Trump. That party has been taken over entirely, clearly, and so I wanted to make clear what I stand for, that's all.
I'm not sure whether the GOP wants any advice from Pritzker, but in the weeks and months ahead, Illinois Republicans are certainly going to be having some very contentious conversations about the party's future. Paris.
Yeah, Illinois GOP Chairman Don Tracy, a lot of dialogue and discussions he'll probably be having in the coming weeks. Amanda, thanks very much.
Thank you.
And up next, hear from some of the congressional winners in last night's election, so please stay with us.
thousands of Puerto Ricans are taking to the streets to protest massive blackouts.
Over the years, Mexican culture, from food to music, has become woven into the city's tapestry.
Medical professionals share the latest recommendations on COVID-19 booster shots.
DACA recipients have been facing longer delays than normal in their status renewal.
Little Village is one of my favorite neighborhoods. This neighborhood comes together to celebrate such an important day in our culture.
Despite the predictions of a so-called red wave, Illinois Democrats who ran for Congress had a good night. Here to talk about their winning and their priorities are some of the local winners. Delia Ramirez, the winner in the 3rd Congressional District. She was previously an Illinois state representative. Congressman Bill Foster, who was first elected to represent the 11th District in 2012. And Congresswoman Lauren Underwood, who was first elected to represent the 14th District in 2018. Thanks to the three of you for joining us, and congrats on your success last night. Congresswoman-elect Delia Ramirez, let's start with you, please, and talk about that win last night. You are the first Latina from Illinois and the Midwest to head to Congress. What does this mean to you and your district?
It's still surreal. And for my mom, who's getting calls from Guatemala and from all over the country, every family member that she's ever met, it is an emotional victory and an honor. Honestly, to have gratitude to be able to represent a brand new district, to yes, be the first Latina in the Midwest, but also a sense of responsibility and what I must do to continue to create a space for more people to lead.
Congresswoman Underwood, last night's victory wasn't necessarily a cakewalk for you. President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris came to Illinois to help you and other candidates campaign last weekend. But tell us a little bit about beating what was predicted to be a red wave. And I should mention right now we're looking at the results that came in for you last night, showing 54% for you, 46% for your opponent, Scott Grider. It says 75% or 79% of precincts reporting. We're actually learning now it is 95% of precincts reporting. But sorry, Congresswoman Underwood.
Well, you know, we saw a lot of enthusiasm from voters over the last several months, particularly since the Supreme Court decision was released. And we know that Illinois reproductive freedom is a key issue in this election. And so I was really pleased to be able to connect with so many voters, despite the district being, you know, completely redrawn. We share values here in Northern Illinois, and I'm grateful to have the support of folks in my community.
Congressman Foster, we still don't know yet the balance of Congress as some other states are still shaking out. But talk about your win and what the next 2 years might look like for Democrats in Congress.
Well, I'm very gratified for my win, and there's so many new people to meet when your district has changed dramatically like this. One of my first priorities will actually be show Delia around Fermilab. We now each have half of Fermilab, the lab where I worked for many years. And so, well, we get to go see all of the underground tunnels with the accelerators and the antimatter collision facilities and everything. But also up north, you see in the northern areas of the district, you have things like Belvedere, which is being challenged by the possible disappearance of the Chrysler assembly plant. And so those rise rapidly to your highest priorities, to do everything you can to shield and to give your district the opportunity to grow.
What would you say is a high priority for you in Washington? More bipartisanship or compromise?
Yeah. Well, the first order of business is to not shut down the government and to make sure that we find a good, workable set of compromises to make Congress operate properly. I'm very concerned that Republicans are already threatening to use the threat of government shutdown or the threat of defaulting on our debts to basically to get leverage to cut Social Security and Medicare. And so this is a real threat. And I have a very strong memories of 10 years ago when the Tea Party wave came in and threatened to default on the federal debt. That just collapsed the economy. The stock market went down. More than $1 trillion was wiped out of the wealth of this country. And we have to avoid that sort of irresponsible behavior.
Delia Ramirez, your husband could not vote for you because he has deferred action for childhood arrivals or DACA status. Where's immigration reform on your list of priorities?
As you can imagine, it's one of the top three. It's him, it's half of his siblings, it's a number of people in my own family, but it's this district. This district is a Latino influenced district, and it was created to be able to acknowledge the growth of Latino community and the growth of immigrant communities from the city of Chicago to the northwestern suburbs.
What specifically would you like to do or to work on or to
I
see
think what
happen?
we've all talked about is we need a comprehensive immigration package, and we need to also protect services. There's a number of things to do, but I think one perfect example is how do we actually begin a process of pathway to get DACA recipients into a pathway to citizenship? Having to live every single year worried if they're going to be able to renew DACA is no way to live.
Congresswoman Underwood, what are your next legislative priorities and concerns about what you can get accomplished in the next 2 years?
Well, I share Congressman Foster's priority of making sure the government doesn't shut down. I serve on the Appropriations Committee, and we're working hard on a federal funding package for the end of this calendar year. We have some important projects included in there that will bring much needed resources right here to our communities in Northern Illinois, and we want to make sure that those resources flow expeditiously.
Delia Ramirez, Congressional Democrats and new Illinois candidates like yourself did well last night, but Republicans in other states did well. What does that tell you about what American voters want?
I think what you've heard from American voters is they want someone that's going to deliver for them, someone that is relatable, someone that listens and will unequivocally go to Congress and make sure they're defending Medicare, defending Social Security, bringing those resources, as Congresswoman Underwood has said. I heard that in this district. My state house background and what I've done there is an example that people kept using as she's going to build on the work she's done in Illinois, and she's going to do that with the Illinois Congressional delegation.
Congressman Foster, if Republicans take the House, they have vowed to investigate Dr. Fauci, Hunter Biden, and others. Are you concerned about this possibility?
Well, I serve on the coronavirus committee, and so I've been listening to their rhetoric on this. It seems very long on accusations and very thin on facts. And I think the right way to answer that is simply have fact-based discussions of things like the origin of the coronavirus. You know, as a chair of a subcommittee on the Science Committee, I and my Republican partner had, I think, the only really comprehensive rational scientific discussion of the origins of the coronavirus. At the same time that Republican leadership were just making up and echoing all sorts of, things that were circulating on the internet. And so I think that is one of the common grounds that we can have. The other thing that struck me is that the Republican Party is actually in trouble. Then, and our democracy is in trouble because of the hyper-partisanship. And I think one of the most significant things that happened yesterday night is the vote in Evanston to get rid of partisan primaries, because that, I think, is the path forward for Illinois and for our country. Because if you look at Donald Trump gets all of his power from the Republican primaries, and many of the most extreme members of both parties come in only having to answer to a primary election and not to the general electorate. And as a result of the system we have, there just is no way for someone who's truly in the middle to get their 51% out of the middle. And so this is something that I see taken up for groups like Change Illinois and so on are coming to this as one of the things that we can really accomplish.
Congresswoman Underwood, what would you say put Democrats over the top? Economy, crime, abortion?
I think that we were very strong campaigners. We had excellent candidates. And quite candidly, we were talking about the issues that were most important to constituents, to voters across our communities. We were not denying the facts of January 6th. We were not we were not the ones that were trying to take away people's reproductive freedom. We had actual credible solutions and ideas for how to keep our communities safe and how to tackle inflation and lower costs for people. And so I think that we just had a lot of success and were able to connect around the shared values that we have with people across our communities.
Delia Ramirez, is the future of abortion, is that a top issue for you? And what do you think Congress could possibly accomplish with a divided government?
Absolutely. And I think that oftentimes, and I've heard this a lot in the Latino community, well, you're talking about abortion, but what about fertility? For those of us that are in our late 30s who have struggled with miscarriages, a ban on abortion would also put at risk my ability to be able to go through fertility treatment. And so having a real conversation of what reproductive rights means is going to be a critical issue. And I think that what we have to do is continue to do the work of educating people on what it actually means when there would be potentially a federal ban, and why codifying Roe v. Wade must be an absolute priority for all of us.
And starting with, like you said, broadening that definition. We've got about 15 seconds left. Congressman Foster, you've been in Delia Ramirez's seat some time ago. Advice to a freshman member of Congress?
Spend a while getting to know your Republican colleagues, because you never know when you're going to be in the majority or the minority, and the investment you put in when you have power and you're able to help them is something you get back in spades when you're no longer in the majority.
Okay, advice you're filing away, I'm sure. We'll have to leave it there. Thanks to the three of you, Congresswoman-elect Delia Ramirez, Congresswoman Lauren Underwood, and Congressman Bill Foster. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you.
And up next, we'll hear from some statewide winners, so stay with us.
It wasn't just Illinois' governor who won big last night. All the statewide constitutional offices remain blue after voters approve additional terms. Attorney General Kwame Raoul and Comptroller Susana Mendoza will each serve a second term. Voters also elected Michael Frerichs for a third term as treasurer. Democrat Alexi Janulius was also elected Secretary of State to take over for the retiring Jesse White. And Attorney General Kwame Raoul, Comptroller Susana Mendoza, and Treasurer Michael Frerichs joins us now to talk about their victory at the polls and what they envision for the next 4 years in their offices. Welcome all of you here to Chicago tonight. Attorney General Raoul, a big victory for you, but a clean sweep for Democrats in all of these races, in the Supreme Court as well, the referenda, these congressional races locally. What put the party over the top, do you believe?
You know, I think the campaigning for us wasn't over the last few months. It was over the last 4 years. And for my colleagues, in their case, over the last 8 years. It's a performance that we've demonstrated in the job. And if you're in the job and you're doing it well on behalf of the residents of the state of Illinois, there's no need to remove you. Additionally, there's stark differences in the policies that the Republican candidates embrace versus the Democrat candidates. There's a laser focus on the fact that we're an oasis for women who want access to safe and legal abortion. There was a stark differences in our approach to protecting workers in the workplace. On a broad range of policies, there was a clear choice to be made between the candidates.
A clear choice in the gubernatorial race as well, although some of the candidates that ran against you two didn't hew so closely to the GOP candidate, Darren Bailey. So what put your race over the top, do you think?
Well, I think both candidates did embrace Darren Bailey, so we should be clear about that. But I think that the results matter, right? I think voters had an opportunity to, as Kwame just mentioned, judge us over, in my case, the last 6 years, when I walked into the worst fiscal crisis in our state's history and had to navigate our state through not just that terrible crisis, but then followed up by a global pandemic to boot, and how I was able to turn around the state's financial disarray. And we've now had 6 credit upgrades on my watch. We eliminated the bill backlog on my watch, and we're paying our vendors faster than the private sector pays. And I think people can feel that. They've paid attention, and the votes show that that's what happened last night. Voters came out, they voted big, and they voted in favor of this ticket that has really done a great job advocating for the people of Illinois.
Treasurer Frerichs, Democrats, again, have all the power in this state. Are they the ones that are going to be held accountable? Say there's an economic slowdown and that bill backlog starts to rise again, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that's the case, but I think it's exactly what happened on election night. Democrats were held accountable for their successes, and the voters found that we were the ones who actually accomplished things. Mm-hmm. You know, when I got the endorsement from the Chicago Tribune and the Daily Herald, they said that actions matter. It's really easy for someone to say words, to make promises, but after 8 years of good investment returns, helping to return records amounts of money to people in the state, standing up to Wall Street firms and cutting fees for families trying to go to college, these are the things that most people care about. People are worried, can I send my kid to college? Can I afford to retire? And we focus on those issues. Democrats do really well.
Attorney General Raoul, there was a big focus on the issue of the SAFETY Act in your race from your challenger, Tom DeVore. You have said many times that you're open to lawmakers going back and tweaking this act. So the election's over. What do you think here? What exactly needs to be tweaked here?
Well, I'm not going to go to the exact, but I think on the broad range, first off, I embrace the philosophy that the way our decision making on detaining people shouldn't be made based upon how much money they have in their bank account. It should be made on the level of risks they are to harming somebody in the public, or the level of risk they are of being a flight risk. And that's what we should hone in on, making sure we clarify that judges can detain somebody who is either a flight risk or a risk of harming somebody. Also, there was question, and there's been debate around the trespassing provision within the Safety Act. And I think we can clarify that an officer can remove somebody who's trespassing onto somebody else's property, and if they're not cooperating, an officer can arrest them. But the bottom line is, both of my colleagues who are on the show with me have served in the legislature, and they know we meet when we were all three in the legislature. We met every year, and one of the things that we did is we revisited laws that had been passed and we've amended them. And so it should have happened. It should happen, as it will next week and a couple of weeks afterwards in the legislative process, but not through fear mongering and misinforming the public.
And it seems like from the election results, those efforts on the behalf of Republicans didn't really make much of a dent in the outcome. Comptroller Mendoza, you mentioned the bill backlog. It's down to about $2 billion. It had been up to around $14 billion.
$17 billion.
Oh, it was $17 billion under the former Governor Bruce Rauner. The last couple of budgets have been propped up by some of this COVID federal funding. Can you keep bringing that backlog down now that the federal funding is not going to be there?
So just to be clear, there is no more backlog. We now have what is known as a working accounts payable. It's the normal cost of operating government in Illinois.
So it's a normal cycle that you're paying vendors.
Yep, normal cycle. My oldest bill today is 11 days old. That's faster than the private sector.
And it used to be, for context, something like 7, 8 months?
No, it used to be 210 business days, the average. Some people hadn't been paid in 2 years when I walked into that office. And so to think that we're paying faster than ever, and the important fact here, which I think voters have come to recognize, is that I paid down the bill backlog. I eliminated it over a year ago before, if I could put it in all caps, I would, before a penny of the federal ARPA even got to Illinois. So I didn't use a penny of ARPA funds to pay down the bill backlog. That took 5 years of meticulous, strategic paying down, matching federal dollars, essentially creating a coupon opportunity every time I could. I'd pay a bill, $1 in Medicaid. I'd get 50 cents from the federal government. Think of me like you're a coupon controller, right? But you have to learn to stretch the value of a dollar everywhere you can. And these are working with Treasurer Frerichs on borrowing opportunities where I could borrow from him at 3.5% instead of going to the market at a higher percentage, and we're paying back the Illinois Treasury instead of Wall Street. Really creative thinking, strategic management over a 5-year period got us to be able to pay down that bill backlog a year ago, again, without federal funds. And so we're in a much better place. And I had less than $60,000, Paris, when I first took office in the state's rainy day fund. Today we have over $1 billion, $1.047 billion and counting, and I've got legislation that I'm going to be pushing hard to add even more to both the rainy day fund and pension stabilization.
And Treasurer Frerichs, you're charged with managing the state's investments. You know, it's been kind of a topsy-turvy market recently. There are fears of a recession. How does that impact your investment strategy for the state?
Yeah, our investment strategy hasn't changed. We're trying to maximize return. We know that every dollar we can make in interest is a dollar that doesn't have to be raised in taxes, or a dollar that doesn't have to be made in cuts to things like our schools, our universities. So we've made over $1.2 billion since taking office. If anything, the rising interest rates will make it easier for us to raise more money, but that still provides a lot of problems for families out there. Families looking to refinance their home or to buy a home or to get a mortgage. Families looking to deal with inflation. So, you know, I think one of the things we can do is we can plan for the long term. We can help people save for their retirement. We can help them save for their kids with disabilities. We can also make it easier and more cost effective for them to save to send their kids to college. Because if we can give kids a good education and they can get good jobs, it benefits them and it benefits our entire state.
All right, Attorney General Raoul, another big task for your office is consumer protection. What are some of the priorities you have for this term in that area?
Well, we're going to continue our work with opioids. The opioids crisis has devastated every corner, every community, every corner of the state. We've done well holding many of the bad actors accountable. We're we're in the process of sort of working towards finishing that off. One of the areas I think that has done damage both to adults but also to young people is online social media platforms. And one of the things as Attorney General that I do is I work collectively with my colleagues across the country on a bipartisan basis. Sometimes it's on a partisan basis. But with the focus on social media platforms, we're working on a bipartisan basis to make sure these platforms are policing themselves and not allowing sort of dangerous bullying to take place, the sale of counterfeit pharmaceuticals, sometimes laced with fentanyl that can be one and done type of drugs that causes fatalities, sale of arms and things like that. We have to make sure that we hold them accountable where we can on misinformation and dangerous misinformation.
Those are certainly big tasks. We're really out of time, but I have to ask both of you. There had been talk in the past about combining these offices, controller and treasurer. Do you think that should someday happen? Are you happy to keep these two separate offices?
I think the two of us work together very well, but I think this is one place where we have difference of opinion.
Yep. I don't think it should happen. Most importantly, look, there's two facts that matter to me here. There's a reason why we have both offices separate. The two largest government embezzlement schemes in the history of the United States of America both happened in Illinois, unfortunately, in the position where the controller and treasurer functions were held by the same person. But even more importantly than that, the credit rating agencies have already said in no uncertain terms that if we were to consolidate both offices, they would see that as a credit negative, and that would cost us hundreds of millions of dollars in increased borrowing
All right,
costs.
Treasurer Frericks, your alternative point of view on this.
I think if the voters wanted to do this, we could do this in a way that saves some money, and I think I'd be happy to work on that.
But not without lowering our credit, so that's a big no.
I think
Even though I love this guy.
That's a big question out there. I think if we can save the taxpayers some money, I think that's something we should explore.
Okay, well, that might be a debate for a future show, but for now, thanks to all of you for being here. Attorney General Kwame Raoul, Treasurer Michael Frericks, and Comptroller Susana Mendoza.
You got it. Thanks for having us.
Congratulations to all of you.
Thank you.
And now, Brandis, we go back to you.
Paris, thank you. Still to come on Chicago Tonight, labor advocates celebrate what they're calling a victory in a state constitutional amendment. We dive into that and two Illinois Supreme Court races. Cook County Board President Toni Preckwinkle wins her seat for the fourth time. We talk with her about issues facing the county and what's next. And J.B. Pritzker wins re-election handedly, but who controls the U.S. House and Senate? Still unclear. That and more from our Spotlight Politics team. But first, some more of today's top stories. A big union endorsement in that other election, you know the one I'm talking about, the race for Chicago mayor? SEIU Local 73 announces they are backing Brandon Johnson, joining the Chicago Teachers Union in supporting his bid to deny Mayor Lori Lightfoot a second term. SEIU Local 73 includes 16,000 Chicago public sector workers among its membership. Possibly complicating matters for progressives, though, Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia is also publicly considering a bid for mayor. The sale of the abandoned Damon Silos property along the south branch of the Chicago River hits a potential snag. Prospective buyer Matt Limited Partnership is still willing to purchase the land and assume cleanup costs, but its involvement has drawn the ire of local activists. They're calling on the state to postpone the sale pending more community input and say the company's asphalt plant in McKinley Park is a persistent source of pollution. Matt's owner, Michael Tayden, refutes that characterization. But neighbors for environmental justice say in a statement, quote, "It is astonishing that after permitting a polluter in the heart of our community, the state would sell the owner more property and claim it as a win for the environment." And it may have been a losing cause, but Chicago Bears quarterback, it may have been in a losing cause, that is, but Chicago Bears quarterback Justin Fields has been named the NFC's Offensive Player of the Week. Fields set a regular season record for a quarterback in rushing for 178 yards, including this 61-yard touchdown run in the Bears' 35-32 loss to the Miami Dolphins on Sunday. Fields also threw 3 touchdowns and no interceptions, passing for 123 yards. Democrats strengthen their grip on the state's highest court, and labor advocates celebrate an apparent victory to adding an amendment to the Illinois state constitution. WTTW News reporter Matt Masterson joins us now with more. And Matt, you've been following 2 races for seats on the Illinois Supreme Court. What do you know about the winners?
So results were trickling in pretty slowly to start last night, but by the end of Tuesday, Democrat Elizabeth Rochford had declared victory for her race in the 2nd district over her opponent, Mark Curran, who had also conceded before the night was out. This race had arguably the more expected result of the 2 Supreme Court races last night, as Rochford was a highly recommended candidate by the Illinois State Bar Association, and Curran had never actually worked as a judge before. In the second race, Democrat Mary Kay O'Brien trailed early, but eventually defeated Justice Mike Burke, a Republican who was running to keep his position on the state Supreme Court in the 3rd district after he was appointed to that seat in 2020. So Burke, Republican, had some experience on the state Supreme Court and actually had a slightly higher rating than O'Brien. Burke was highly recommended by the state bar, while O'Brien was only recommended, but voters ended up pulling in the Democrats' favor in the end.
And Matt, what do these results mean for the makeup of the court?
So going into Tuesday, Republicans actually had a chance to flip the high court for the first time in decades. They could have pulled the Democrats' 4-3 justice advantage to a 4-3 Republican advantage. But that required both Curran and Burke to win. And instead, with both of those candidates losing, the court has actually shifted even further in the left's favor, with Democrats now holding a 5-2 advantage on the high court.
So you've also been following the Workers' Rights Amendment, which was the first question on voters' ballots. Remind us what that calls for.
Right. So it essentially ensures that workers across Illinois will have the fundamental right to organize and collectively bargain. And this also bars any laws from being passed in the state that would interfere with those rights. Unions across Illinois, of course, had pushed very, very hard for this change, saying it would help empower workers, improve workplace safety, things like that, while opponents have said that it could lead to higher taxes statewide.
Now, votes are still being counted, but it appears to have passed. Remind us how this gets approved.
Right. So there's 2 different ways that this amendment could actually be approved. It either needed 60% support from those who voted on this particular question, or more than 50% support for those who voted in general on the ballot, whether they voted for this question or not. So as of Wednesday, the amendment has fallen below that 60% mark on the question itself. It's hovering around 58 or 59%, but it still could clear that second marker, the 50% of people who voted in general. And while the result still hasn't been fully determined, advocates for the amendment, like the Illinois AFL-CIO and others who backed it, have already declared victory, saying that this is going to pass, even though there are still some votes to count.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on that one and see what happens. Matt Masterson, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Matt's coverage of both the Illinois Supreme Court races and the Workers' Rights Amendment on our website, WTTW.com/news. And now to Paris with another winner from last night's election. Paris.
Brandis, Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle secured a victory for the 4th time, defeating Republican challenger Bob Fioretti. That makes her one of the longest tenured office holders in the state, but challenges remain for the county, including crime, non-pandemic budgets, and health care costs. And joining us now is Tony Preckwinkle, Cook County Board President. President Preckwinkle, congratulations to you and welcome to Chicago tonight.
Thank you, Paris.
I know it wasn't just your race that you were focused on last night, but you wanted to flip 2 Republican seats on the county board to Democrat. Looks like Republicans are going to retain those seats. Your assessment of how the party did overall in Cook County?
Well, I'm really pleased. First of all, I want to thank the voters for supporting me for a 4th term and supporting Democrats pretty much generally across the board. There were 15 Democrats and 2 Republicans in the preceding body, and now we're going to have maybe 15 and 2 as well. So.
And you're ready to get to work with that ratio?
Yes.
All right, and you're used to that. And, you know, history says the party in power suffers big during midterms. Democrats in Illinois not only didn't suffer, but they swept these statewide races and the local congressional races. What do you think did the trick for your party in Illinois?
Well, we're a blue state in the midst of purple and red states, and I'm very grateful for that. But, you know, I'm encouraged by the fact that Evers got reelected in Wisconsin, that Whitmer got reelected in Michigan. So we saw some victories in the Midwest more broadly, and I appreciate that.
Was it abortion that drove this? Was it fears about democracy, fears about Trump or election deniers?
You know, I think all of the above. Yeah, I'm a history teacher, and I'm a big believer in multi-party, at least 2-party government. You know, there needs to be a contest of ideas. But the problem at the moment is that all the reasonable people are in the Democratic Party. If you talk about a woman's right to choose, if you talk about reasonable gun laws, if you talk about religious freedom and respecting people's choices, whether they go to churches or mosques or synagogues or temples. I mean, we're in a place in this country, unfortunately, where, as I said, in my view, the reasonable people are pretty much all Democrats. And I didn't feel that for most of my life. I've believed that there were good people, reasonable people in both parties. But the way in which Trump has manipulated and controlled the Republican Party is really scary to me.
Speaking about being a party of ideas, your biggest priorities for this term in office?
Well, there are three things that we've talked about consistently. One is increasing our investments in behavioral health. One of the things the pandemic showed us was not just that we needed to ramp up our Department of Public Health to meet physical health challenges, but that we needed to invest in our health system in terms of behavioral health. And so we're going to do that. We're going to create a Department of Behavioral Health Services, and we're going to try to figure out have an asset inventory, and then figure out where we need to make investments. We've got a guaranteed income pilot, $42 million, the biggest guaranteed income pilot in the country. 2 years, $500 a month for 3,250 families in Cook County, and the lottery will be coming up shortly. We've had more than 200,000 people apply. So there's a great need out there. And I'm hopeful that we're part of a national movement that will encourage the federal government, in my lifetime, encourage the federal government to do a guaranteed income. And we need it nationally, not just here in Illinois.
I want to pick up on that guaranteed income pilot. As you mentioned, 200,000 people applying, only 3,250 spots, $42 million, funded largely from those COVID relief funds. How are you going to measure whether or not this program is a success and is worthy of continuing?
Well, we've got academic partners, and we're going to have a control group in the same way that you would test medication, right? You have those who participate in the survey or the study who get the meds and those who get a placebo. Well, we're going to give people money, and then we're going to look at the control group that didn't get the money and has similar characteristics and compare the outcomes.
Is it going to be a challenge to find the funding to continue this when this COVID money runs out?
We've committed to continuing it. We've dedicated cannabis revenues, and we'll figure out how we can support it on an ongoing basis. I've committed to that.
I want to talk about the issue of crime in Cook County. A lot of heat, as you know, thrown mostly from Republicans on things like the Safety Act, bail reform in general, which you have always been a big proponent of, but also Mayor Lightfoot has thrown some shade at that and whether or not it's contributed to increased crime, namely alleged offenders who are out and then reoffend. Has it been an unfortunate byproduct, this increased crime, of bail reform?
It has nothing to do with it. First of all, in 2016, we had an uptick in murders, and the philanthropic community and government got together and started investing more in violence prevention, anti-recidivism, and restorative justice work. In 2017, 2018, 2019, we saw a reduction in violent crimes. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. And if you look at the statistics, in March of 2020, when we started seeing the shutdowns and the closures, we saw a vertical increase in violent crime. And in the 35 largest cities in the country, we've had spikes in murders and shootings. This is not a problem that's unique to Chicago or Cook County or Illinois. This is a national challenge. And I would argue that it resulted from economic insecurity. It resulted from the isolation, the depression, the anxiety that people suffered. I mean, our society started fraying at the edges, I think, in a lot of different ways, and one of them was the uptick in violence. And it's a terrible challenge. Everybody deserves to be safe in their homes, to feel safe in their homes. But I think we have to understand that this is a national issue. It's not something that's unique to us, and it's nothing to do with the Safety Act, which hasn't even been implemented yet.
And at the same time, Democrats have acknowledged they're going to tweak the Safety Act. What do you think those tweaks should be?
My state senator, Robert Peters, was one of the proponents and strong supporters of the Safety Act. He's part of the negotiations around the tweaking. I can't tell you how they're going to come out.
And it might just come down to general language. Voters approved the Forest Preserve referendum. I mean, in your role as county board president, you also oversee a separate unit of government, the Forest Preserve. So their tax levy is going to go up 0.0025%. What will that money go towards?
Well, first of all, I'm grateful to the voters of Cook County for supporting the referendum. You know, we got people to say, I'm going to pay just a little bit more in my taxes to have a better forest preserve system. And what that means is we'll be able to acquire more property, we'll be able to do more restoration work, get out the buckthorn and other invasive species, and we'll be able to do maintenance. So we've got acquisition, restoration, and maintenance work. And there's a lot of that needs to be done. 11% of the land in Cook County is in forest preserves. We're blessed. You know, there's very few places in the country where where we have so much land devoted to recreation and to ecological conservation.
And that is beautiful land. President Preckwinkle, 4 years ago, you ran for mayor. Looks like this field is wide open this year. How come you didn't want to enter the fray this time?
It was a miserable experience, and they chewed up my children. I didn't want to do it again.
So you just didn't want to expose yourself to any of that?
As I said, it was a miserable experience.
So you're happy, is this your last term as county board president, or might there be more?
I just got elected. Ask me in 4 years.
Because last time you said that might be your last term.
I just got elected. Ask me in 4 years.
Okay. County board president, thank you for being here. We look forward to more visits here in the studio in person, and best of luck.
Thanks, Paris.
And again, our thanks to Tony Preckwinkle. Up next, analysis of the midterm election results with our Spotlight Politics team, so please stay with us.
The results are mostly in from the midterm elections. Our Spotlight Politics team breaks down what we do and don't know about yesterday's election. They are, obviously, Paris Schutz, Heather Sharon, and Amanda Beneke. I did not forget your names, I promise. It's the day after the election. We're all a little punchy. Governor J.B. Pritzker wins again, but he was asked about running for a different position this morning for president. Here's what he had to say.
I am not focused on that at all. I am focused on serving as governor for the next 4 years. It's really the most important thing to me. Is we have a lot of challenges that Illinois needs to overcome. We've got to work hard on it, and I'll be doing that.
What do you make of that?
It's not a definitely not, of course not. How could you even ask that question? He has no plans at this point. And by the way, President Biden said today he has plans to run again, but he's not saying I'm definitely doing it. And I don't know if maybe you know this better,
I'm not sure
Amanda.
when the speculation is going to go away, if it will. I mean, clearly Pritzker does have the means, the connections, the capability to make a run on a national stage.
It appears that he has the
ambition. He, like you said, he did not outright reject this notion, but it's clear that he's a little exasperated by constantly being asked by it, and I'm not expecting him to answer any differently. Until and unless Biden does step away, then sure, I would not be surprised.
But his victory speech last night was 99% focused on a national offense. He, certainly mentioned Illinois issues, but he referred to sort of the MAGA nation as something that was rending the fabric of democracy. That speech was targeted almost as an audition, as, hey, if you need an understudy, I'm right over here in Illinois.
Pick me.
And I am a happy warrior, which is something we've seen him do before when he's on the national spotlight. After the Highland Park massacre, he got a lot of attention for flashing that anger that it seemed at the time President Biden was not able to sort of channel. And that's what he did last night, which is why he got all of those questions. So it's not our fault for asking these questions.
No, it's not an accident.
Paris, a lot of concern over the SAFETY Act that it has been from conservative radio host Dan Proft. One of his big contributions to this cycle was money, obviously, paying for ads for the people who play by the rules PAC. How did that turn out for him?
Well, let's delineate. So there's the Bailey campaign, and they spent money and put out ads to try and make the case for Darren Bailey. Then there was people that play by the rules PAC, funded with $53 million from Richard Uline, who owns Uline Corp. Dan Proft was the guy in charge of this PAC, making all these ads. It did not work out, and we mentioned this last night. They focused, every time there was a Bears game on or something, you saw this ad. It was always focused on crime, and they went all in on that issue when there were other things that Governor Pritzker was vulnerable on, like, let's say, unemployment. Illinois has a higher unemployment rate than other states. DCFS, problems there, or LaSalle Veterans Home, or high taxes.
The economy.
The economy, which was the #1 polling issue, especially among independents, they focused on none of that and used $53 million to make this case. It didn't make a dent. And by the way, Capitol Facts had a list of all the state house races that they also contributed to. All L's. They lost every single one of them. A terrible night for that campaign.
Terrible night, and what is, however, interesting to me as well is the success of running ads on broadcast TV and how much that can make a difference. You look at a lot of these legislative races, and holy wow, because in part, Governor Pritzker gave a lot of his personal wealth to the Democratic legislative leaders to barrel down to their candidates in competitive races. They were up on TV for months, and you saw a lot of Democratic successes there. This is a sign where when we talk about money, it may not be something that we want to focus on, but you have to, because it can change the tide of these races. And you saw a lot of Republicans in the General Assembly losing. They were not up on air.
And that's why the Democrats still have supermajorities in the House and Senate, which is no small feat in a year that is traditionally hard for the party in power to stay there.
I'm surprised. I would have thought that those incessant ads might have made an impact, but these results show that it made no dent at all.
Doesn't look like it. Heather, we just heard from Democrat Bill Foster. He won against Republican Catalina Lauf. Any surprises there?
So Catalina Lauf was really sort of one of the marquee MAGA candidates for the Republicans. She's young, she's attractive, and she was always on social media, sort of punching back and sort of spreading disinformation, misinformation. Now, Bill Foster is a veteran congressperson. He is a scientist. I don't think he'd be offended if I said that he is maybe not the most exciting candidate on the face of the planet. But so she really tried to capitalize on that social media celebrity. It didn't work. He won pretty much going away in a race that I think a lot of people thought would be a lot closer. An indication of what we saw across the country last night, that these MAGA candidates can make it through the primary and then face real headwinds in the general election.
But let's remind everybody, that was part of the Democratic strategy here in Illinois and in places like Pennsylvania. You know, spend a little money, the DGA, Democratic Governors Association, which J.B. Pritzker is a main funder, a big funder of, spend money boosting those candidates in the primary because they're unelectable in the general election. They got a lot of heat for that strategy, although from a strategic standpoint, it worked. Those candidates proved to be unelectable in places like Illinois. In Pennsylvania, the governor, Josh Shapiro, won handily, and that's a swing state.
And let's briefly also add that these congressional districts, again, drawn by Democrats in Illinois, because they call the shots, because they have all of the power, of course, in Republican-controlled states. The opposite is true, and districts are gerrymandered to their advantage. But why did we see, in part, some of these suburban successes? A lot of reasons, among them abortion, among them, however, is also that the boundaries were drawn to their benefit.
Gerrymandering at its best, if you ask the Democrats.
Or worst.
Or worst, exactly, depending on who you ask. Amanda, House Minority Leader Jim Durkin saying that he will not run again for a leadership position after GOP's loss last night. What could that mean for the future of the Illinois GOP?
I think that we've been asking this question all along, and we're going to continue to ask it for some time to come. Republicans presumably doing the same. There is very much a schism in the Republican Party overall, and you have seen that being fomented in, frankly, the primary. You saw it really play out in a very public way there, in between the quote-unquote establishment, more moderate Republicans, and then those who are aligned with Bailey, the quote-unquote Eastern Bloc of the General Assembly, those who want Trump's endorsement and tied themselves to sort of a MAGA point of view. And we have seen that come to the fore, and it appears as if moderates are, with Durkin stepping down, are really recognizing that the party is a different one than when he came in. It has changed over, and what that means for the GOP long-term, I think, remains to be seen.
Well, over the last 8 years, there have been three main funders of this party. Bruce Rauner funded everything when he ran for governor. Then it was Ken Griffin, especially in the primary here, and then Dick Uihlein. It seems like they've gone wherever the money is, but that's not helping them electorally. And I brought up last night, Gary Grasso, the mayor of Burr Ridge, says, what about moderate Republicans? Why can't we have a voice in this party? Well, because they can't win primaries. But then the conservative Republicans can't win anything statewide. I mean, this is a clean sweep in Illinois. So if you're Don Tracy, the chairman of the Illinois GOP, you have a lot of thinking to do about what do I want this party to be and how do I want it to actually have a seat at the table. I mean, I want to get money, but I also want to have candidates that can be elected.
So before we run out of time, we got to talk about this one because we've been playing political football with this one around the newsroom today. The election that is coming up, mayoral candidate Brandon Johnson gets a union endorsement from SEIU Local 73. And also control of the House, the U.S. House, is in limbo, but we're still waiting to hear from Representative Chuy Garcia on whether or not he's going to run for mayor. Heather.
The election is over. The election is just beginning. Huzzah, huzzah, right? So Brandon Johnson rolled out a big endorsement. SEIU has 16,000 workers. That's a good volunteer base. They contribute to campaigns. They will get the job done. Everybody is waiting to see what Chuy Garcia does, even with the balance of the House still in question.
Can I just quickly say, it's just, these elections are so close together, and I would anticipate that's going to mean very low turnout with all these candidates low turnout. I don't know who's in charge of this, but why is it set up like this, where an election is going to be 3-4 months away from?
Yes.
Everyone's already tired.
When they're
Not me.
High school journalists are tired. Give us a break. All right.
Voters.
Absolutely. That's 4 months apart, 3 months apart, something like that.
Whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever it is. It's close together. All right. That's Spotlight. Paris, Heather, Amanda. Thanks, y'all. And we're back to wrap things up. But first, a look at the weather.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast in the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night, live at 7.
Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.